office hours. We are so thankful you are here to join us. We are so thankful to also have Jason Dietrich with us, who's our Director for Educational Partnerships with ETS. And so before I turn the floor on over to Jason, I just want to make four quick announcements just to make sure everyone's aware of some things coming up. So the first thing is yesterday you should have received an email from me regarding the NAEYC standards for program approval for early childhood education programs. The reason why we sent out correspondence was because we had received some questions regarding which set of NAEYC standards early childhood programs should align to. And so we wanted to send out clear communication, make sure everyone was aware that it's the professional standards and competencies for early childhood educators, and it's the standards that were adopted in November of 2019. And so we linked those standards in the email. If you have any questions about the standards or anything when it comes to NAEYC, just feel free to shoot us an email. The second thing is we will hold a drop-in next Tuesday, the 22nd from 9 to 1. It's going to be a Teams drop-in where you can come and ask any questions you have about Read to Succeed, the workbooks, or really anything else. So it's meant truly as a drop-in, knowing you have a lot of other things on your plate this time of year. So come in, pop in, ask questions, and then pop out. And if that time and that date doesn't work for your schedule, just feel free to shoot me an email and we'll find a date and time that works for you. Third thing, friendly reminder that the annual assurances and the annual report, if your institution is accredited through the State Department of Education, those form stack forms are due by April 30th. I pulled the data this morning and I'm in the process of emailing individual deans and directors to let them know if we do not have your form yet on file. So if you can get that to us by April 30th, we'd appreciate it. I know April 30th is a heavy date. You have Title II, you have CAPE Annual, you have these assurances. May 1 then rolls into the EPP workbooks. So I get it, it's busy. So let us know what you need. And then that leads to my last announcement, which is, of course, the Read to Succeed workbooks. May 1 is the deadline for early childhood, elementary, and special education programs. August 1 is the deadline for any of your middle level programs and secondary education level programs. And if you have any questions, please reach out. We are all in this boat together, and we're all going to make it together. So I'm going to turn it on over to Jason so we can use and be very advantageous with our time with him. He, again, is our Director of Educational Partnerships with ETS, and he's kind of going to share some updates with us. I'll hang on after the call ends, so if you have questions, you can stay if you're able to, and if not, just shoot me an email. But Jason, I'm going to turn it on over to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. So Jason, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Jessica, and good morning, everyone. So in talking with Jessica and Mary there at the department, I offered to come online and speak with EPPs whenever the department felt that it was appropriate to do so. As of recent, ETS has had a few major updates to some of our programmatic areas. Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of I'm going to call it a candidate support that we are now offering called Praxis Bridge. Little caveat there, the department, along with the board, has to adopt Bridge, which has not been done as of this point. These are preliminary discussions, and I'm going to pick on Mark because I see him right in the middle of my screen here. Mark was on the formal full presentation that we did around our Praxis Bridge. So he may also be a good resource during this call, just to kind of have a discussion if we need to. I'll also be discussing a short overview of two other areas. One is Praxis Steps, which is kind of a version of Bridge, but not. So we'll talk about that. And then Mary did ask, along with Jessica, that maybe I touch on the elementary education redesign assessment, because that is going to be kind of a large one that we're undertaking now. Along with those, I'm here for questions. So this is a great unfiltered opportunity for you as an EPP, as a provider, to be able to ask any questions you have of me around the Praxis program. No questions off book, right? And if I don't know the answer and I need to get something from an internal colleague at ETS, I'm happy to do that and respond back. I'm also going to do a little quick something here. I'm going to put my direct email address in the chat for you as EPPs. I do ask that you please not share it with candidates, as I certainly do not have the bandwidth to work with all of your candidates on any kind of an ongoing basis, as I do have 12 states, South Carolina just being one of them. Let me throw that in here for you. There you go. So feel free at any time if you're having questions as an institution, or if you've got specific candidates around a question. Maybe you've got a candidate that's missing the mark on an assessment a few times and you want to do a deeper dive. We're able to do that for the candidate. There's a lot of supports that we can offer that I think a lot of EPPs, candidates, and state departments really aren't aware of. We just probably don't do a good job of marketing those, I guess I would say. So before I begin, like any substantive information here, if you have questions along the way, I'm pretty open when I'm having discussions with folks. If you want to just come off mute and ask the question or put it in the chat, however you want to do it, I'm really comfortable with. It doesn't really matter to me. This is your meeting, and I appreciate being invited to it. So let's see if I can share my screen here.
We see it, Jason. It's looking good.
That is a good thing. Okay. I'm going to try and adjust my screen because I do not see you all. I guess that's fine. So this was a slide deck that we did utilize to present to the department and a few folks that Mary had invited along the way. This deck, Jessica, I guess a question for you is, were you able to access the deck finally?
No, sir, I have not yet been able to.
Okay, we'll get that corrected. So this full deck, Jessica and Mary will have access to, along with a recording of the full presentation that we did for the group. It might be something that wants to be shared with you as EPPs in South Carolina. Obviously, that's up to the department. But let me go ahead and just jump in here. I'm really at a disadvantage because I cannot see you all. Give me 1 second.
So as Jason kind of moves his screens around, which we all have to do, I do want to put in the caveat. So Praxis Bridge, what Jason's going to talk about, is a new program that ETS has rolled out. He'll explain it all to you, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Praxis Bridge has not been adopted yet in South Carolina. Currently, 6 states have adopted Praxis Bridge. In order for it to be adopted by the state of South Carolina, it would have to go before the State Board of Education. It would have to be adopted that way. The reason why we asked Jason to share this information with everyone is because candidates, if you're in one of those 6 states that have adopted Praxis Bridge, you might have candidates either moving from there or have a friend, colleague, social media buddy who's aware of Praxis Bridge, and then they might be asking the question here. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with that, so that way no one's, hopefully it's as clear as it possibly can be. But
Jessica, quick question is, are there plans to take this to the state board?
I think right now we're just in the learning process of it all. I think that there needs to be more conversations about it. If you are in favor of Praxis Bridge, you are more than welcome to share an email with me, and I, of course, will share it with senior agency officials. I do think that the EPP voice here needs a presence, right? Because this is a program that could impact you at the pre-service level. Right. And so it's important for you to ask the questions that you have about it and then express your interest or lack of interest in the program. Jason, did I give you enough time to figure everything out?
Yeah, for some reason, it does this on Teams sometimes. That's fine. I'm just going to try and move my screen around a little bit. Yeah, it's giving me a headache, but that's okay. I'll work through it. Sorry. So Jessica, you're hired because that was great for you to frame Bridge, right? And the process. And I think I'll just add to or plus to that. I think part of the reason it's a good discussion here today with the group, where Jessica said it, may impact your programs, right? So part of Praxis Bridge, we are offering that service on Praxis Core. So as institutions, this might be an area where you'll see a potential value add, especially in Praxis Core writing, but we'll get into that and we'll have a little bit deeper discussion around that. So what we have today, I'll go a little bit into program overview, maybe discuss a little bit about the modules, brief over some candidate experience, maybe talk about the pilot a little bit. I'm not going to do the full hour-long presentation. That would be a bit daunting this morning. And there are some other things we want to get through. But again, I'm going to make sure Jessica has access to the full presentation that we did give, so that can be shared out. So let's do a little bit of an overview. So what is Praxis Bridge? Praxis Bridge is an offering that we have that was done initially in partnership with the state of Connecticut. So Connecticut tracks their pass-fail rates very, very closely on their assessments. And they also look at the range in which those candidates are passing or failing. So they found that they had a lot of candidates that would have passed their assessments in what we call a -1 standard error of measure. So what that means in reality, it's generally around 3, maybe 4 questions on the assessment, depending upon which form that candidate received to test on. It would make the difference, I guess, from passing or failing. So Connecticut came to us as their vendor and asked us to come to the table with a solution to support their candidates in this realm. Now, many of you may know when we do a standard setting study for one of our assessments, we already determine and identify what a -1 or -2 or +1 or +2 scoring model would be for every one of those assessments. So ETS has kind of already done that work, if you will, through the standard setting study. So we sat down and figured out a methodology working with the state of Connecticut where we could offer for a candidate who did not successfully complete their Praxis assessment within a -1 SEM of the state's adopted or passing cut score, to be able to take a professional learning module instead of retaking the entire assessment. Now, keep in mind, as we discussed going through, this is within a -1, so you're talking just a couple of questions. So maybe if our assessment would have been, more of a dynamic assessment than a static assessment, maybe there would have been an opportunity for a few more questions to come in from the question bank, right? Obviously, we don't do that because of the psychometrics behind it. We do have static assessments for that purpose. But kind of think of it in that mindset as you're going through, like, hey, they would have passed if they had a couple more questions. And the data that we did a deep dive on, 2/3 of the candidates that were eligible for this bridge option would have passed the assessment had they had the opportunity for 2 or 3 more questions on the assessment in that given area. So we'll talk a little more about that. So based on the candidate score, ETS will provide a fully aligned module that matches the area of greatest difficulty. So you all know within our assessments, you've got your domains. So if you've got a candidate that is really low in one domain, which is often the case, we will target the learning modules to that domain where that candidate is deficient. So it's a methodology for the individual to learn as they go. So the module will include a content overview, practice items, and a knowledge check designed to affirm their understanding of the material. So what we do is we take items that are generated in a professional development manner from our praxis work. They're not just random items. So individuals are learning as they go based off of assessment development writing these modules, who developed these assessments in the first place. And then knowledge checks are based off of real, actual praxis questions. So what we're doing is we're just, I would say, maybe boosting that candidate. Would that be fair to say, Jessica? Maybe boosting them just a little, filling in a little bit.
We use the term scaffold in education.
Scaffold. There you go.
I got you.
So that would allow these candidates an opportunity to learn, maybe refresh, maybe it's not even learn, right? Maybe there's a few concepts that they just didn't recall because they may have been earlier in their education journey. You know, we all see that occurring. So that's kind of the crux of how and why we got to Bridge. So let's talk a little bit more around program objectives. So it's an accelerated path to certification is what we say, meaning it allows the individual to quickly take the bridge. So right now there's a 28-day waiting period, which I'm sure you're all aware of. Plus, there could be a gap in scheduling depending upon the assessment and how many times a year it's offered. So you could potentially have a candidate that's waiting 90 days to retest for an assessment when maybe it was just a very small piece that they just needed a little helping hand. This is also a low-cost alternative to a candidate taking the entire assessment, and we'll get into that a little bit further. So it's definitely a data-driven approach. We're precise in the identification of the content knowledge gaps. Our psychometricians review these assessments, right? These modules are built based off of what that candidate did or did not do well in. They're very targeted, and it's more of a systemic approach to addressing candidate skill deficiencies. And again, that's a term, deficiency, right? I often look at it and say they just needed a little support in that area. And let's talk about ease of implementation. This is more for the state client, I would say, so the department, and probably the candidate. But it's a turnkey program, right? You can turn it on, turn it off. It integrates seamlessly. It basically just starts at the beginning of a month. That's how we do it. So if it's the middle of the month, the department and the board adopt it, we turn it on for the beginning of the month, and it just starts rolling. It's got seamless reporting back to the department and EPPs, and it's aligned with existing certification frameworks. So while the candidate or test taker will be directed in another path, and we'll go into that in just a few moments, at the state level or EPP level, you're just going to know at the end when they get their scores, and you see that score report, whether or not that candidate went the all pathway or just the traditional pass their assessment. So here's kind of what it looks like just in a graphic. So they're taking their praxis assessment. Score is more than one SEM below, they have to retake the assessment. That's today. That's the world we live in today. But if Bridge is adopted and they fall within the -1 SEM, we go into that content overview model. They're giving practice items with annotation. So again, it's more of that learning module. We do the knowledge checks along the way. Okay. So in the routing model, basically it's criterion based through statistical methods, right? We determine a threshold on each category based on the relationship between the category score and the total scoring, considering the whole test population. So you're all probably aware we test in Windows, right? Even if it's an ongoing regular assessment, it's still scored in Windows. Okay. And we do equating. It's not just a person-to-person grade per se. We equate that batch. We have norm-based approaches. So there's a threshold for each category in relation to the testing population's mean or median score. Then we also have tie-breaking methods, right? The category representing the strongest relationship with the test will be prioritized if there's a tie. So let's say you have two areas in the assessment where they may have been deficient or needing additional support. The system will look at it and say, well, of these two categories, one has far more weighting on the assessment. That is the module they will be directed towards, which is really positive in nature, right? It's probably the more difficult work. That's why it had more weighting in the assessment. It's also probably more mainstream in what's required for them to be teaching in the classroom. Again, that's why it would have more weighting in that specific area of the assessment. So we target that. So currently, we rolled out Bridge with our elementary series of 5001. So it's the ELA, Math, Science, and Social Studies. We have just added, as of last week, Praxis Core for reading, writing, and math. Again, the eligibility, it's candidates who nearly pass the assessment within a -1. They'll be provided that option. States can adopt a 3-year retroactive eligibility as well. ATS will do that work for the state if they decided to do that. And I'll go into the data just a little bit further on in the presentation so you can kind of see where South Carolina would fall if we were to do that. The cost, oh, Judy's got her hand up. Go ahead, Judy.
Thanks, Jason. Just thinking about the tests that are, current. Do you look at the overall, like in terms of the elementary education series, or could the students be within one SEM on each of the 4 sub-tests?
Judy, you are smart. That is correct. So each sub-test is really a separate assessment at ETS. They can take it as a bundle, but your 5001 series is 4 separate respective assessments. So they could potentially be within a -1 on your ELA, your math, your social studies, and your science. And they could be, depending upon how it flushed out in their grading, they could be eligible for Bridge in all of those areas. Now, is that usually the case? No. We have not seen that. We've gone through a pilot, which I'll get into a little bit further here. But there was a pilot with 3 states that we did this with, Connecticut being the primary. And we continue to monitor the data very closely. We're not actually seeing that to be the norm. So, but great question. So, and again, the price is $50 for the module versus retaking a full Praxis assessment, right? So it's a little better support for the candidate. It's also cheaper for the candidate, which is good, right? We all know these individuals, could be tight on money. We hear that in the field, right? You're a candidate. You may not be working right now. You may be full-time in school, doing your student teaching. Who knows where you're at in your educational pathway? But $50 is certainly easier than coming up with a full assessment give again. Oh, Latasha.
Hi, Jason. What would be the timeline for that student to be able to be eligible to take that Praxis Bridge? So, like, how many days would the student have?
So here's the way, and let me see if it's in the next. It's probably buried in the slide, so we'll just go ahead and address it now. So here's a little bit of how it works. So eligibility, the candidate will be notified when they receive their scores. So as many or most of you know, that's usually around a 5 to 7 day process for the candidates to receive their scores once scoring has completed. The option will be available for purchase in their Praxis account. So basically what will happen is they'll get notice their scores are in their portal, At the same time, if they're not successful, but they are bridge eligible in an area, they will receive an email along with that, giving them instructions for the option. And I will say this, the option to take bridge. So even if South Carolina does adopt this, it's still a candidate choice. The candidate does not have to do bridge. The candidate can go right back and register and take the full assessment themselves. It is their choice or their option. So when they receive that email, they'll have 6 months from the date they actually log into their portal and purchase for $50 Praxis Bridge. It is an asynchronous model. We say it takes approximately 45 minutes to complete a module. That is I'm going to say guesstimate, right? Probably really shouldn't even have those minutes in here, but it's just a guesstimate. So remember, they're not learning new content with Bridge. They've received the content knowledge in your institution. Often it's just learning gap, right? They may have forgotten a few concepts, may have just overlooked part of it. Who knows what it is, may just have test taker anxiety, and that might have been their weaker area. So they can go through the asynchronous model. Upon completion, candidates will receive a certificate, okay? They're also issued an updated score report within 5 business days of completion of Bridge, which will turn it into an alt passing model. So basically it rolls their failure up into an alt pass. And I'll show some examples and go into a little bit more about that. And for states that do select a retroactive model, ETS will do the one-time work for the state to notify all those candidates over the past 3 years that would have been eligible for Bridge and take them down that journey if that was the wishes and wants of the state. We do have a couple questions in the chat. So will you be adding more Praxis tests? Absolutely, Susan. We'll get into that in the presentation a little bit. And ETS plans to add additional, yep, same thing. So yes, we will get into that. So a little bit about the score report. So this is the way the score report would look under an alt passed model. So here you've got a candidate. They were issued a Praxis score report within 5 business days that indicate alt passed. Okay. Candidates who successfully completed the Bridge will be designated as passed within the Title II reporting system. So this does loop back around into your Title II reporting. And the alt pass designation data will be pushed into the org's EDM account during your regular weekly updates. So in EDM, it's also going to show alt passed for you as an institution. But you can see here, we don't actually go in and change the scoring that the candidate received on their score report, right? We just update it with the area or the module where they did pass through Praxis Bridge and roll it up into an alt pass for the overall assessment. Oh, that was Jessica. So that's kind of how the score report would look. And we have had conversation with Mary at the department, because currently the department would have to do some work as well within their licensing system to be able to accept an alt pass status. And we've had that with some of the other states that have come on with Praxis Bridge, and it looks a little different in each state, how the reporting comes into the actual state. But that's definitely something we just worked through with state IT. So let's talk about some of the other areas that we're doing Bridge in. As I stated before, we're starting with elementary education, your 5001 series. We're moving on to core academic. One thing of note here where I would like to show you folks. So if you look all the way to the right of this slide, this data is from September of 22, which is the beginning of a testing year for us, through February of 25. You're not going to see massive numbers here, okay? Which in a way is really good. That means your candidates are actually doing fairly well on the assessments, right? If you had massive numbers showing here in the far right column, I would really be concerned, right? Because you've got a lot of folks just not quite making the mark. So let's look at something that would be of interest to you as an EPP. Next to the last line is your core for writing. So over this 2.5-ish year period, you will see that you had almost 2,400 candidates take Praxis Core writing. Of those, 388 candidates would have been bridge eligible. Now, we know in South Carolina and a few other states, the writing portion of core seems to be the most problematic for students. So if this were enabled in South Carolina, especially like with your lens as an EPP, kind of what Jessica said early on, if you were interested in this, you would have a voice, right? Going back to the department. This is where, in my humble opinion, EPPs would gain value in Bridge. Because you've got your reading, writing, and math for core. You've got candidates that would have been eligible for Bridge, which would have allowed them entry. So this would have been a true benefit had we had this in the past. But again, we can go retroactive for candidates that are still out there that have maybe walked away or taken more time to try and do the assessment, whatever it may be. But that number of 388 is kind of a tell in writing, right? You had that many candidates within that -1 that could have been picked up and brought into the fold, into the program. Charmaine had a question. I was wondering if the basis for composite score option or I will have to check on that, Charmaine. So I'll take that question down and get that reply back to Jessica, and then she could put that out. Catherine, based on the last meeting, my understanding is that the composite would work for the other 2 sections of core. Yes, actually, Catherine, I believe you're right. So let's talk about some other test titles, because this was a question that came up. So during the summer of 2025, we're going to be bringing Bridge into the teaching reading space. So our 5205 or 7002 assessment will be Bridge eligible. Your PLT for K6 and 712. Your ELA assessment and your special ed foundations. And then going into fall 25 and spring of 26. So fall of 25, you can see we're going to have mathematics, social studies, which is the new title version, our early childhood assessment, several middle school, the special ed severe to profound, our new para pathways, which is our new parapro assessment, along with our redesigned elementary assessment. So looking at the same period of time, that 2.5-ish years, you could see here where there's candidates, if you look all the way to the right, that would have been Bridge eligible, right? You're not seeing high numbers there. So in part of my conversation with Mary and some of the folks at the department, Bridge can be adopted assessment by assessment. It's not an all or nothing model. So the department, my recommendation was maybe start, if they're interested in this, maybe start with elementary and core, right? Something of that nature. The department doesn't necessarily have to go down the pathway of adopting Bridge for every one of these assessments. It's based on need within that state. So the modules. So for elementary education, in ELA, we're talking about reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Math, you've got your numbers and operation, your algebraic thinking, and your geometry and measured data, statistics, and probability, and then social studies and science. So when we spoke a little bit earlier around like targeted, right? So this is where you're going to look at those sub areas and you're going to say, oh, you know what? Numbers and operation under math may have a higher weighting in the assessment, and they were within a -1 there. Oh, but they were also within a -1 on geometry and measurement. Which one has that higher weighting, right? That's where the system's going to determine. And it's probably going to be numbers in operation. Okay, especially when you're talking about elementary. The content overview, practice items, knowledge check, we've kind of briefed over that. And again, you're going to get this presentation from the department. The candidate experience a little bit. So when the candidate receives their score report and the option for bridge, they're directed back to their portal, so their Praxis account. When they go into their Praxis account, it's already going to be an option there for them to select Praxis Bridge for whatever it may be. They're just going to process it through. It's going to take them to our Praxis Bridge, like in this case, we're referencing or showing elementary ed, right? And here, specifically, you're going to see physical science. So this candidate was low in that area. This is kind of a flavor, if you will. You can see some of the screens of what our learning management system looks like. So it's going to take them through different parts of Bridge, different sections. It does have a lot of knowledge on the screens. Everything that you do, it has that hypertext. So as you're rolling over things, it's giving explanations. Again, it's giving that refresher as they go through. Then it's going to go through and give them practice items, much like our practice tests that we offer when you register for an actual assessment. It's based off the same modeling, okay? So as you can see, that's got the hover text. It's going to give them hints along the way for them to go through. It's going to tell them if they're incorrect in a knowledge check question, and it's going to give them information around that. Okay, so again, it's another opportunity to refresh or learn as they're going through. Once they pass through, they do get that certificate of completion. Okay, before we get into adopting, because I don't think on here, and my apologies for 1 second. There you are. Now I can see you all. I talked briefly about our pilot. So Connecticut was the driving force. Right behind Connecticut, when we put out a call to action, Kansas and West Virginia jumped on board. Those were our 3 pilot states. They did a 90-day pilot with Bridge. I will say we did make modifications along that path, right, during that 90 days. Modifications that the clients, meaning the states, with feedback from their EPPs and candidates who took Bridge, came back and said, hey, this could look better, this could be better, the touch, the feel, the modules, whatever it may be. So we did make modifications along the way. And at the end of that 90 days, those 3 pilot states adopted Bridge across the board without hesitation. And since we've had additional states come on board, we have Nevada, Colorado, a few others in the hopper. We're actually up to 7 states now that are on Bridge. Probably going to be around a dozen and a half by summer when we roll out some of the other titles. So it is starting to get a little traction. Again, it is adopted at the state level through whatever means or process is required. So in South Carolina, to my understanding, obviously department leadership would have to support Bridge, right? And this is a big discussion, right? This is a big ask, if you will. So there's that discussion with the department, and then if the department supported Bridge, that would move forward to the state board, correct, Jessica? She's nodding.
Yes. Yes.
And again, the state board would then, authorize the adoption per assessment. Let's keep that in mind. Per assessment, they are done individually. Now, obviously, if it's the elementary series, we would adopt the 5001. Nobody's going to piece out just those few pieces. And I would assume core would be the same thing. They would adopt for the whole core portfolio. But all your other assessments, they may not even hit the table initially. I've told a lot of my states, go slow. If there's a specific target or need, and you wanted to bring Bridge on and try Bridge for a while, do that. You know, again, I referenced core for South Carolina. I think that's a benefit to the EPPs. But the state will make that determination. So kind of how to get started, we talked a little bit about that. During the onboarding, there'd be an institutional onboarding webinar, you know, more of a detailed website around Praxis Bridge geared towards South Carolina. You know, we'd share the test taker emails, institution resource emails. There's flyers that go out. A lot of information that hits the field if Bridge is adopted by a state. Now let's talk a little bit about the pilot results. Okay. So this data was, so I thought February 1st of this year. So November 1 of 24 through February 1 of 25. They had 2,083 test takers in the pilot. Remember, this is Connecticut, West Virginia, and Kansas, 3 states. So out of those 283 candidates that took Bridge eligible assessments, 253 fell within the -1. So they were Bridge eligible. Now, what you're going to see here, remember earlier I did say, this is up to the candidate, right? Nothing mandates that the candidate does Bridge just because it's available. So you're going to see that only 82 individuals of the 253 took advantage of Bridge. So that was their choice as a candidate. 73 successfully completed. So 73 out of the 82. And you can kind of see where the eligibility lied here. At this time during the pilot, it was only for the 5001 series. That's it. It was one assessment bundle. So we send out a lot of surveys when we're putting a new offering or support or assessment out into the field. So over 95% of the participants agree that the data-driven approach is a good concept, right? That same 95% agreed that the practice questions effectively prepared them. And the participants valued the focus on learning in a specific knowledge gap, right? Like we've been talking about, it targets that specific domain or area. It is self-paced. We stated earlier, they do have 6 months to complete it. It does give detailed feedback along the way. So it's really in the candidate's hands, I would say, once they receive that email, right? It's up to the candidate how they move forward in the Bridge process or retesting traditional assessment. Again, we just want to say thank you to our pilot states, which were, as I said, Connecticut, Kansas, and West Virginia. So I went through very quickly what could have been a super deep dive presentation. It still took quite a while though. So again, we will share this. If there's additional questions that come up, obviously you can feel free to email me. You can go through Jessica at the department or Mary, whomever your direct point of contact is, and we'll be sure to get information back to you as EPPs. Just know that we are working with the department. And as Jessica stated, if this was something that you think would be a valuable asset to your candidates as a support, then maybe you want to have that conversation with the department. So Jessica, that's kind of it on Bridge.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And as Jason said, you know, guys, what's great about working with EPPs and coming from an EPP is we all have that researcher kind of background. And so I know you've got questions, right? I have questions, especially when you show me data. Like I want the disaggregated data, but that's just me.
Right.
So as you have questions and as you think about this, and as you know, you have conversations with your faculty and conversations with colleagues and conversations with candidates, throw us those questions that you have, because this is how we determine what is best for our state and what is best for our candidates, is through asking these questions and thinking thoughtfully through those questions. All right, so Steph popped a question in. What are some talking points that would be beneficial to include in a letter of support? So first of all, I would encourage you to, if you are in support of Praxis Bridge, I would talk about, why, what you like about the program and how you think it would be beneficial for your candidates, right? Because this is the whole idea here is to benefit candidates, right?
Yes.
So let's keep that as the focus. So anything you can say to that, I think would be beneficial. And then this would be important to know before adoption. So this is definitely not something, like Jason said, that could be moved overnight. So as Jason kind of mentioned, the process is it would need to have the support of the agency, and then the agency would then present that to the State Board of Education for their approval. So this is not something that would say happen probably within the next month, unless, I'm really wrong and conversations are already being had above me, which could totally happen, right? But this is going to be a process, and I think it's really important that we have these conversations and we flesh out the questions to figure out what's best for us, for our candidates, for our EPPs, for our state. So please shoot us those questions. Jason, how'd I do?
Fabulous. You're hired. Mark's like, no. And I keep picking on Mark because he is like dead center of my screen here. Yeah, I mean, it's really something to think through, right? I will say, most of you obviously don't know my background. I'm a native Nevadan. I'm actually sitting in my home in Las Vegas today, working from my home office. I retired from the state. At one point towards the end of my career, I was deputy state superintendent. I ran licensing, ed prep oversight, you name it. Anything adult in the system fell under my side of the house. We had another deputy that handled everything kid centric, right? So we kind of split the department in two. I will tell you, when we were having internal discussions talking about what could Bridge look like, what should Bridge do, and those around me know I always say I'm going to put my department hat on, right? I'm going to look at this from a Department of Ed standpoint and an EPP, my partners, right? And I'm going to say, how is this supporting my candidates? How is this benefiting their educational journey? That's how I look at things when we're having these types of discussions. And honestly, don't take this from me as an ETS rep. I mean, I am your vendor in the state. This is a product offering. I understood, right? But looking at it and just saying to myself, wow, we should have had this a decade ago, right? Because it would have been far more beneficial for the candidate to have that support along their journey. That's kind of my mindset, right? And I'll be so bold as to say, I look at your list, right, and where they compare Bridge eligibility against, the assessments you've adopted in South Carolina. I certainly wouldn't even take Bridge down the path for every assessment. It's probably not even warranted in your state, right? But those initial candidates and maybe those elementary candidates coming out of the gate, that's a huge bucket of folks right there. And obviously we need teachers, right? Everybody needs teachers. So, when you're saying like some points, right? What are some points or discussion points if you wanted to support this? That's for me as a person, not an ETSer, right? Just thinking about those candidates and what they need and how we can support them. We have test prep, we have all those things, right? Sometimes that doesn't work for folks. Sometimes that's really not the mode that they need. So this is just another option. Mark, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, Jason, in the pilot, what would be one or two challenges that y'all found that you didn't expect?
Reporting. Reporting was the biggest one, and trying to figure out the methodology within the score reporting and how we loop that back into Data Manager on through Title II. But we've overcome that. We've fixed that issue with the states. The other thing, I think initially, the modules maybe weren't as targeted as they probably could have been. in the first month of the pilot, that was easily rectified. So again, I will shout out to those pilot states. And I will tell you, those pilot states, and I've offered this to Mary and the team already, they love to talk about the pilot. They love to talk about the work that they put in to help us develop this to support their candidates. So, Mary knows all the directors for those 3 states. They're all part of NASDAQ. It's a tight-knit family right at Mary's level. And she can talk to those folks at any time. And knowing Mary, she probably already has. So, they will give you any positives, negatives, whatever it may be. But as of now, at this point where we're at, after the pilot, we're in full adoption mode, they're all very happy with the model. So the other thing is, because it's in a learning management system and it's not tied into a praxis assessment delivery model with a psychometrics team involved, we can be far more nimble with it. So we can change question banks. We can update things very regularly with little impact, right? We can move things quickly because of where it's housed. And we did that intentionally and purposely, right? Because we didn't want it tied into a Praxis platform where it would be daunting, if you will. Because our psychometricians want to get in the middle of everything we do when it's in that platform. Not to say they're not involved in Bridge, because they absolutely are. But when you start touching their platform, those folks get real handsy. So, we kind of took the path that we did. And it's calming for a test taker, I will say, because they don't feel like they're taking an assessment, right? It's more like just going through a learning module, like a professional development. So it has a calming effect. And we've talked to candidates about that. So that's just some food for thought. And obviously, Mark, thank you so much for the question there. I think Judy had her hand up. Oh, Judy, you're on mute. Which is where my wife wishes I was every day.
Thank you.
So.
I hit the hand down button instead of the unmute. Yeah, so I just want to say, one of my, and Jason, sorry for this, but one of my arguments about the core has always been, it really is a barrier for our students. And I said, once we get them in the program, and your data from South Carolina showed this, we can help them get, past the next praxis test. So I like the idea of this bridge, and I hope everyone on this call talks to people at their EPP. I certainly am going to take this, Jessica, information to the Dean's group, and I see, a couple of folks that attend those meetings here. So yeah, I'd really like to, talk more about this and how we might go about pursuing this. Because I truly feel like, we do a great job in our EPPs of preparing our students through our programs that, the end result I'm not worried about because I know we can get them there, but it's that barrier coming in because we don't have any control over what happens to them, in essence, prior to having to take the praxis core. So anything that we can do to help them pass that, I think is definitely worth taking a deep dive into.
And Judy, you didn't need to say anything about me. I'm with you, right? I'm with you. I know Jessica did want me to talk about a few other topics. We did run really tight on time. What I want to do is just real quick, something else that we're exploring in Praxis is something we're calling Praxis Steps. So, and the reason I want to bring it up today is because it kind of leads into the bridge conversation. I'm going to show one probably impactful slide here. Can everybody see that? Or let me see, should I go into presentation mode?
If you could pull it up in presentation, I think it would just be bigger on.
There we go.
There we go.
So, I mean, we could talk for hours about this work as well. But really, what the visual or the walk away from this is, so you're going to see Praxis Bridge all the way on the right. We've already spent quite a bit of time today talking about that. Praxis Steps is the other model that we're coming into. So Praxis Steps will allow a candidate in the near future, if adopted by a state, same process, right, to take just that category area of the assessment again. So when I mentioned a few times during the bridge discussion, this is a candidate choice, right? So if the state has adopted it, it's a candidate choice. Um, and actually, maybe I'll pull that back a little bit. I don't even know because I'm not further into the process with Praxis Steps. They're still flushing a lot of this out. This may not even have to be adopted at the state level. Once the assessment itself is adopted, this may just go through. But candidates can just go back and take that one specific area. So, like if you're talking elementary and it's the ELA category, they may just go in and take ELA again. So that's something we're working on as well. This will be coming out to market with the elementary redesign assessment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send Jessica probably this whole slide deck that I'm just showing a slide or two from. And it discusses a lot about the elementary redesign. Jessica, I can also offer, maybe on your next office hours if you want, I can have our individual that is our champion over this work come and share with the group and actually present around the elementary redesign and Praxis Steps and what that's going to look like. Definitely open to do that. She's an amazing colleague and does just absolutely incredible work. So we could do that. I will share this presentation. Also, I don't know whether it was questions from the field or just a topic you wanted me to touch on, but about our proctoring and customer service. So ETS in the past for at-home testing has used multiple proctor organizations. So Prometric, which is who we contract with for physical testing sites, we've used them along with a couple of other agencies for proctoring. And honestly, what we found at ETS is we kind of lose control of that, right? We're using a third-party vendor. It kind of falls within their calendaring, their cycles, whatever that may be. So ETS made a very conscious decision probably about a year and a half ago now. We purchased an organization that does proctoring called WeBox. It is now an ETS company. So since last December, all at-home proctoring is done by WeBox for ETS. So we have far more control over that proctoring now. Reason I bring that up, that allows us, because it's an ETS company, if we're having concerns in the field around proctoring or we're hearing things, we can directly take action, right? We're not going through a third-party vendor. We're going through our own company. So that can help benefit the candidate experience. So if you're hearing from candidates, there's any proctoring issues or whatever that may be, I would encourage you maybe follow whatever the protocol is for contacting, whether it's Jessica or whether it's sending me a direct email, whatever the protocol is in your state. Absolutely happy to look into anything for you. Along with that, ETS has had some woes in customer service. We all know that. We've gone through several different agencies because we did outsource customer service a few years ago. It is still outsourced. I will tell you, from what we see on the numbers, customer service has gotten better, but you do have situations, right, in any business. So I would also encourage to reach out and contact if there's any issues that you or your candidates are seeing around customer service. I am happy to handle that. Just reach out. I'm perfectly good with that. We want to make sure that you as an institution are supporting your candidates and your candidates are being supported by us, right? We want to make sure that we have that circle.
And to piggyback off what Jason said, please loop me and Jackie into those emails, or you can email us and we'll directly reach out to Jason for you. That way we are aware if this is just a one-off situation or if this is a bigger problem that as a state we need to kind of address. So if you would just continue to keep us in the loop, we'd really love that.
And Jessica, Catherine did put a comment in here. But if you as the department, right, if you gather any of this information, I am happy to take a look at this and take this over to the operations side of the house and they can have conversations with WeBox.
Gotcha. And Kathy, feel free to send me any email. We can chat more about this kind of offline one-on-one if you want. And anyone else.
So I apologize we couldn't get through a lot more of the content. It just kind of goes that way.
It happens. But Jason, I think we might be taking you up on your offer to talk to us again about the elementary redesign and to learn more about Praxis Steps, because I do think the elementary redesign elementary is one of the largest programs in the state for
Yep.
initial certification. And so it's very important that we're all on the same page with any kind of changes that come through, so that way our EPPs can properly prepare our candidates. So we'll be circling Jason back in. If we can't get to him in May, knowing that May is a little hectic for EPPs, you've got commencement, you've got final grades, you've got all other obligations that come in May. Typically June, a lot of faculty roll off contracts. I'm a little hesitant of scheduling June call for you, but maybe we roll into August or September, right when our EPPs come back and we have more faculty back on contract. So Jason, we
Sounds
can't
good.
thank you enough for joining us and sharing part of your morning with us.
Absolutely.
EPP colleagues, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll hang around if you have any questions. Have a great day.
Thank you all so much for having me this morning. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Jason.